Unlike 2016, Donald Trump will return to the White House with the momentum from winning something few people believed he could, the popular vote. Trump is clearly on track to win the popular vote, with votes still being counted in California and other states. He'd be the first Republican in 20 years to pull that off. My next guest, Ron Brownstein, argues that the shift to Trump may actually offer Democrats a path to recovery. He writes that while disappointment with Biden provided a huge lift for Republicans last week, moving forward, Trump will need to sustain support on the strength of his own agenda, leadership style, and results. And happy to welcome in CNN senior political analyst Ron Brownstein, who is with us now. He is also a senior editor for The Atlantic. Hey, Ron, good to see you. I want to start with the sort of premise that your piece begins with, which is, despite all the head scratching, the questions about how Harris lost, the answer might actually be quite simple, that she was considered the incumbent, basically, and voters were deeply unhappy with the results of the Biden administration, so they voted for the other candidate. But Ron, you point out that cuts both ways, and that can create an opportunity for Dems in 4 years.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously there are a lot of things that go into every presidential race. Democrats have to look at what happened with Latino men and whether there is a enduring cultural gap there. And obviously some of her positions on LGBTQ issues hurt her. But the through line in this election is one that we have seen before. I mean, there is simply no precedent for a party holding the White House when an outgoing president is facing the level of discontent that Biden was. I mean, we know that when incumbents who have the level of disapproval that Biden did run for re-election, they tend to lose. Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, Trump himself in 2020. What's discussed less is that even when that president chooses to or has to step aside, his party has also lost the White House. Harry Truman in 1952 was unpopular. Republicans won. LBJ in 1968, deeply unpopular with the war and inflation. Republican won. And of course, in 2008, when Bush had to leave amid the financial crisis and discontent over the war in Iraq, Democrats won. So, yes, there's a lot going on, but in the end, 60% of voters said they disapproved of Biden's performance, and over 4/5 of them voted for Trump. That was a headwind that was simply insuperable for Harris and in all likelihood, any Democrat in this environment.
Yeah, and Ron, what I also thought was interesting is that even among those who decided to vote for Trump, they didn't necessarily agree on all the issues. Yeah. I mean, you cited surveys where voters said they actually disagreed with him on reproductive rights, or they disagreed with him about mass deportation. But what they prioritized, it seemed, was the economy. And in that way, Ron, I wonder if that creates a bit of a blueprint or a roadmap for Trump and the Republicans in terms of what they have to prioritize the next 4 years.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, in some ways, the most abnormal thing about this election was how normal it was. Trump is anything but a normal candidate, but voters kind of treated him that way to a large extent. We had the normal hydraulics of American politics. When people are down on one party, they move toward the other. That doesn't mean, as you noted, they have completely erased all of their concerns about Trump. I mean, between the exit polls and the VoteCast survey, which are the two competing, measures of how voter attitudes, we saw a majority of voters said they thought Trump was too extreme. A majority said they worried he would steer the country toward authoritarianism. A majority opposed mass deportation. A majority supported legal abortion rights. But in each case, a significant slice of voters with those views voted for Trump. In effect, they decided that an unpredictable future was less of a risk than the unacceptable present. And obviously, if Trump can deliver economic results that give people more of a sense of security and stability, he's going to be in a very strong position. But if they are still feeling economically insecure in 2 years, and he has pursued a lot of these policies, sweeping tariffs, mass deportation, rollbacks of civil liberties, that voters still are expressing resistance about, hesitation about at least, the picture could look very different in 26 and 28.
Yeah, I'm curious, Ron, because we spent so much time, I think the year before the election, talking about how historic it all was. And in many ways it was. What's so remarkable now is just how much of a sweep it really was, whether you're talking about the Senate, whether you're talking about now it looks like the House, whether you're talking about the battleground states. I'm wondering, based on your research, if there's an election you could most compare it to, where you see a candidate sweep Washington the way we just did.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a bunch of elections lately where the party that wins power wins the White House, has also won the House and the Senate initially. Obviously, Biden did in 2020, Trump did in 2016. This feels a little more like a 1980 or 2008, where you have a broad sense of discontent with the outgoing president, and the other party not only wins unified control, they win the popular vote. You know, to me, the key difference here is comparing this to 2022, because in many ways, 2022 sent a false signal to Democrats. What we saw in 2022 was that in the states that the parties were not actively contesting, where they weren't spending a lot of money, whether it was a red state or a blue state, Republicans improved. They rose on that tide of discontent with the economy and Biden. But in the battleground states, Democrats were able to do quite well in governor's races and Senate races in places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. They, in effect, quarantined those states with their campaigns. They were able to focus voters on other issues beside their discontent over the economy. That was the model for this year. I mean, that's what Democrats thought. So what did we get in 24? Well, as in 22, we saw in states where they weren't really competing, you mentioned New Jersey, whether it was a red state or a blue state, Republicans improved, because in those places, too, they were discontented about the economy and Biden. Democrats hoped that, again, as in 22, they could separate, they could segregate the swing states. And to some extent, they did. They didn't lose as much ground there as they did in the non-swing states, but they didn't do nearly as well as they did in 2022. You could not separate them as much. A much higher percentage of voters who said they were unhappy about the economy voted for Trump in 24 than voted for Republican candidates in 22. And that, to me, was the key tipping point that goes back to what we were saying before. A quarter of women who said they were pro-choice voted for Trump. A quarter of Latinos who said they opposed mass deportation voted for Trump. The cross-cutting pressure of the economy just won out in too many places for Democrats. Not to say there weren't other issues, but that was the through line.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it is really remarkable. I mean, obviously, we had inflation that was at 40-year highs. And so in a lot of ways, it's just been really sort of interesting to see the impact of that, both psychologically, financially, obviously, but also politically now. Ron Brownstein, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much.